So we drive around Kansas City and kind of checking out some rentals, checking out what could potentially be some rentals. This is actually a really beautiful neighborhood. I'm driving down Ward Parkway to get to the area of the city that we want. But one of the things that I constantly think about is what kind of portfolio do I want to create? And I remember when I first got started, one of the things that I asked one of my realtors was what kind of portfolio I wanted to create, and his response was, actually, it kind of threw me off. And I hear this answer quite often, and the answer is, you create the kind of portfolio that is most comfortable for you. Now that's kind of ambiguous, but I want to let me be more clear. Whenever you create a portfolio of real estate, if you think about it like a paper asset portfolio, you have your aggressive stocks, you have your intermediate stocks, you have your bonds, you have your cap, your small cap stocks. Think of it exactly the same way when it comes to real estate. Your really aggressive pieces of real estate might be, something like a house in a Class C or Class D neighborhood. Now, if you have the stomach for that, then go for it. Your really conservative kind of properties might be a property like off in Ward Parkway. It's a $200,000-$300,000 house that is a lot less, maybe even somewhat a negative cash flow, but it's just somewhere you want to park some money that is safer than maybe a more volatile stock market. And so whenever I start to create a real estate portfolio, whenever I start thinking about my real estate portfolio, that's what I look at. I look at how do I actually want to create the balance that fits me best. Some of my mentors talk about, and the real estate guys at radio, they talk about the personal investment philosophy. And your personal investment philosophy is how you see your own portfolio, whether it be you want cash flow, you want equity, you want Class C, you want Class B, you want Class A, you want resort kind of property, you want apartment buildings, whatever the case may be. And when you go really deep with that, you can actually determine what feels good to you. And it's all about you. It's all about what you feel. Because in the end, when you have 10, 12, 15 units, it's going to be all about how much you can stomach when it comes to the volatility factor. For example, when you have a Class C property, you might not get your rent until the 15th of the month. I have one of those, and I don't like them. And so the Class C properties, and you may say, well, I need to evict them, but that's the nature of the beast. You get late paying tenants. That's just the nature. You buy. Here's a very interesting point of view that I heard. It was you buy a tenant demographic. Whenever you buy a piece of property, you don't buy the property, you buy that tenant base. And so whenever I go out and buy a property, I'm not looking at the house, I'm looking at the tenant base. If I'm buying in this neighborhood over in eastern Kansas City, I know I'm buying this tenant demographic. If I'm buying up north in Kansas City, I know I'm buying that tenant demographic. And so whenever I go look at a neighborhood, I no longer look at the house to be the thing that I'm buying. I look at the tenant base to see the thing I'm buying, the demographic that I'm going into. And then the other thing that I constantly think about is how many pieces of property that I need to own. And so I remember when I first started, I said I wanted to own 100 pieces of real estate. Like I wanted to own 100 single-family homes. And I know the economies of scale, you can do some very interesting things. And I've heard a lot of successful people who own hundreds of single-family homes. And then I've heard very successful people who own very few single-family homes. And then I've heard the hybrid of both. And the thing that I think is, for me, it always goes back to your personal investment philosophy. But again, the thing that I think is probably more valuable for me is having all of my properties in one area. I remember when I had first got started, I had a duplex and a single family home, and my duplex was in northern Kansas City and my duplex was in southern Kansas City. Or my duplex was in northern Kansas City and my single family home was in southern Kansas City. And when I got ready to do maintenance or fix up or go and meet the property manager down in the city, I had to drive 35 minutes to get to that house. I remember when I was taking a class from Robert Kiyosaki, and one of the things that he recommended in his class, his coaching course, was to buy your first property close to where you live. Now, whether you believe in that or not, that was what he taught, and what I found to be rather helpful was to actually, I should have listened to him. I didn't. I said, I'll be fine, I'm the exception. And I was really hands-on with my first property because I didn't know a lot. I didn't know how to assemble a team. I didn't know how to assemble contractors. I didn't know if I was overpaying for things. And so I ended up burning through all my cash, and when I burned through all my cash, I had to get creative. And so when I got creative, I ended up having to go to the property. I was doing things that I normally wouldn't do, I normally don't feel comfortable with, and putting up blinds and painting and putting down tile and making sure the house looked presentable so that I could get this thing rented out. It took me 6 months to rent my first house out, and it's really interesting because it wasn't that big of a house. It was like 1,000 square feet, 1,100 square feet, and it took me 6 months because I didn't understand real estate. So now I being a little bit more experienced, I actually understand what Robert Kiyosaki's theory behind staying close to your home was, because if I had been 10 minutes away, I probably could have been finished with that house in a matter of a couple of months versus 6. It was the headache of driving 35 minutes to go to that house that really got to me. So anyway, I like the economies of scale of having all of my units in one centralized location under one roof. There's a lot of different thought processes to that. One of the theories is that when you have all your houses under one roof, people, what I mean is apartment buildings, people tend to have shorter term leases. And so the argument between single family investors and apartment investors is that the apartment investor is buying shorter cash flow, and the theory is that single family investors are buying longer term, because most single family renters rent for longer than a year, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I've heard 10 years. And so they're a lot longer term. And so it again becomes a question of what's more comfortable for you. I like apartment buildings because of the valuation method that they use. With single family homes, when you evaluate a single family home, when an appraiser evaluates a single family home, what they do is they take like-kind properties in the same area and evaluate them against the principal property. In many cases, in multifamily property, they evaluate the stream of income. And so if I can produce and add value with the stream of income, now I've appreciated a property that's multifamily. It doesn't matter how much I appreciate a single family home because they don't take the income stream in many cases as the source of the appraised value. And of course, in multifamily, they do use the like-kind method of appraisals as a check, but in most cases, in many cases, they use the income stream. So they use the financials of the property to determine what the value of the property is.